which of these teams really did a good job selling, Scott? Like a lot of teams were selling, like Anaheim, Montreal, like, and I don't think Anaheim was really looked at as being a seller until late, especially when Pat Verbeek came in. Seattle, like some of those teams, like Scott, we got some new GMs who really stuck out to you as getting maximum returns for what they had available.
Yeah, well, and maybe that's maybe you hit on it. Pat Verbeek takes over midseason in Anaheim, and they peel off Rickard Rakell and Josh Manson and Hampus Lindholm, three big pieces. And like Pat was so transparent, not letting assets walk for free. Didn't look like he could extend them, sent them out. I thought he did I thought the return for those players was very high. Mm-hmm. And same thing, right? Ken Hughes comes in untested as a GM. Jeff Gorton has come in mid-season as the head of hockey ops. I mean, the whole change. Marty St. Louis comes in behind the bench. Like that Montreal team's been in such a state of flux. And yet I think of the returns, I thought the Tyler Toffoli deal, terrific deal for Calgary way early in the process, but a terrific return. The Lehkonen return was excellent. Ben Sherratt gets what, Ben Sherratt's a really solid defenseman, but he's not anyway, I'm not going to throw in Ben Sherratt under the bus, but
he's not Chris Pronger.
He's not Chris Pronger. He's not Bobby Orr. So I thought Ken Hughes, for a guy who was 6 months ago thinking about player contracts and extensions as an agent, where am I going to get my next, young junior star that I can turn into, an NHL star making lots of money. I thought he did a pretty darn good job at the deadline. And I think and Ron Francis too, all three of them, even though Ron Francis has been at it for a year, obviously with an expansion team, you're not tied to these guys, right? Like you aren't emotionally invested in, geez, for the most
losing
part,
our captain. What are we going to do?
We love that kid and, he's blah, blah, blah. You can go in with a surgical precision and say, no, out, assets back. Let's, you got to do something with them. But I thought those guys did a nice job. And I think maybe it's easier if you don't have an attachment to them to say, I'm putting my stamp on it. My stamp begins here.
Yeah, I really like what Ron Francis did in Seattle. Like they've compiled so many draft picks for the next several years. Lazan, Giordano, Yarncroke, like who am I missing? They moved a lot of players out. And I think when I look at Seattle big picture, everybody was surprised with the expansion draft. It didn't feel like they maximized what they could have done. And I think we were building it off of a really odd framework of what the Golden Knights had done previously. And Seattle wasn't going to be able to do that because teams learned their lesson. But what effectively is happening in Seattle to me is that they've now built the stock that Vegas did in their first year of the expansion draft. Now Seattle's just essentially built that a year later for the coming drafts, and I think by necessity, they had to kick the can down the road a year. And I think Francis was really smart to do that. So there's going to be some pain there though. Like that club, they can make some moves in free agency this summer, but it's not going to be great in Seattle for a couple of years, but that your expansion team, like we forget, this is expansion hockey, so they got 2 or 3 years to build towards it. I was really disappointed in Long Island. Like the Islanders, Lou didn't do anything, man. Like all they did essentially was make their team older. They gave Clutterbuck a 2-year deal and Parise a 1-year deal extensions, and they didn't move anyone. They had Varlamov, who's got a year and $5 million. Like teams are looking for goalies. Like, how's he's not on the block? How do you not move Clutterbuck? How do you not even look at your roster and realize, man, we're not that great. We could move a Beauvillier or somebody for big return and change the dynamic of what we have. And no, it just essentially to me what the Islanders did says, hey, we're going to run it back next year. We're going to chalk it all up to COVID and our injuries and playing out of a different building and hope it goes better. And we got older. Like I was disappointed there. But how did Lou not do anything? It
hasn't been, listen, it hasn't been great. Yeah. Listen, the proof is obvious. You go to 2 straight Final Four, Eastern Conference Final. You lose twice in a row to the Stanley Cup champions. That is admirable work, but I think it is short-sighted to just assume, as you point out, that this is simply an off year. That we are so good that it was just circumstances that derailed us. And I think that's not the case. And I think it's going to be a real struggle for the Islanders, given what they failed to do at the deadline and frankly failed to do in the offseason, to get back to that level.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, Sorokin is I think they still have a great coach, maybe one of the greatest coaches of his generation. They have good goaltending. They have a terrific system. But man, to suggest that this is just a blip, like when Tampa missed the playoffs and then came back and, went on this terrific run, starting with 62-win regular season. I think that's a great conceit because I don't think the Islanders are built that way. And
yeah.
I think next year could be a long year as well.
COVID or no COVID. I don't buy it that they're going to get back. Noah Dobson he's an RFA. He's going to get a big deal on D. But they don't have hardly any young talent in there. They have 2 entry-level contracts, I think. Barzell's 24. It's an aging group. Do they bring back Chara at age 46? Do they bring back Andy Green for another year? I just see a lot of late era Lou Lamoriello with the Devils happening in New York.
Yeah.
Where the Devils finally imploded, aging veterans couldn't get it going. It feels similar.